Hi, this is Beeb Birtles with John Broughton on Retrospectives 3SER KC Radio. Will I make a man of my life? Tell me, will I make a man of my life?
Yes, I am.
Just to start off, how vivid are your memories of your early years in Holland?
Some of my memories are quite clear about growing up in Holland. Certain things obviously stay with you and other things you forget, but my memories are that I was a very happy young kid growing up in Holland for those first 10 years of my life. And, when I was about 8 years old, I think my parents bought me a piano accordion and I took lessons, and that was probably my first kind of thing to do with music when I was that age. Not sure what you're after as far as the
No, that's fine.
Early days.
Do you remember having expectations of what Australia would hold for you?
Well, no, not really. I stayed pretty open to, whatever it was going to be like. To me, I guess it was just a big adventure.
Yeah.
To get on a ship, on this huge ship that left Holland and to travel, halfway around the world to come to Australia. I had a little bit of an idea of some of the things that were that I would find in Australia because, I used to go with my parents sometimes to the film nights that the Dutch government put on because, of course, they encouraged migration. And, we as a family, we saw films on not only Australia, but New Zealand and, California and Rhodesia, all these different places, Canada. And but once my father had made up his mind that he was going to go to Australia, we took more of an interest, obviously, in the films that were shown on Australia itself.
So when did the love of rock and roll occur? Was that before or after you arrived here?
Yeah, that was in Adelaide when I was growing up. Actually, there were a couple of young single guys who came over on the boat with us, who we actually met on the boat. And one of them wasn't happy living in Australia and decided to leave and go to the United States. And when he did, my parents bought his record player from him to give to me for my birthday, and that it was that record player that really started my love for music because I started listening to the radio, local Adelaide stations, and cutting out the the station was called 5DN, cutting out their Big 60 chart that they would publish in the paper every week and keep those on the clipboard. But, along with a lot of the English migrants who also landed in Adelaide, I just got caught up in the whole thing with the British invasion when that happened and, just fell in love with music, basically.
Now, I've no doubt you've had to tell this story a million times before, but for the purposes of this profile we're putting together, the origins of your name, Beeb.
Oh, the origin of my professional name?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. During the 60s, there was a cartoon series on TV called The Dick Tracy Show that had lots of different characters in it, like Mumbles and Prune Face, and there was also another character called BB Eyes. And when I went to high school, to Plimpton High, the kids at school, for some reason, my friends, started calling me BB Eyes. That was immediately abbreviated to BB. And all through my high school years, I was known as BB. And it wasn't really until Darryl Cotton joined my first band. He abbreviated that to Beeb, and that became kind of my nickname, And then I took my Dutch last name, Birtelkamp, and shortened it to Birtles and anglicized the spelling, and that's how I came to be known as Beeb Birtles over the next many years, actually, during my life in music.
Tell us about the early days of the Zoot in Adelaide, but before the move to Melbourne. Were you already attracting that teeny bopper element, or did that come after the move?
That came a little bit later. I think we just started off as young kids, rehearsing in our drummer's bedroom and putting songs together and, playing the local places. It took us quite a while before we became really popular, even in Adelaide itself. I think it all came when Paddy McCartney, who was one of those singers in the Twilights with Glenn Shorrock, so we opened for them at Glenelg Town Hall, and he liked the band, he liked what he saw, and he went back to Melbourne and told Wayne DeGrucci, a manager in Melbourne, about us, and he came over to check out the band, and through that we were offered a recording deal with EMI Records, and it all happened at that same time when we'd been playing around Adelaide for maybe 2 or 3 years, and becoming more and more popular, and that was really just prior to our move to Melbourne, which is in about I think it was August of 1968 that we left Adelaide and went to Melbourne, of course, never to return.
Now, you played bass in Zoot. Was that your first instrument of choice?
It was actually the only reason I came to play bass was that our first band, which was actually called Times Unlimited, had a bass player in it, and I was actually the lead singer. But we only played one show ever as that lineup. And after that show, for some reason, the bass player decided to leave. And so my friend John Darcy, who was the lead guitarist in the band, said to me, well, look, Beeb, you're going to have to learn to sing and play bass at the same time. And that's how it came about. We actually made my first bass guitar. My father made the actual construction of the wood of the guitar, and then John knew how to lay out the frets on the neck and measure it out and put in the pickup to make it electric. And then I would sit for hours and hours in front of that same record player that was given to me when I was about 12 and pick out the bass lines on the records that we were, or on the songs that we were, wanting to perform as Zoot. So that's how I came to play bass.
How comfortable or uncomfortable were you with the whole Pink Zoot image? Did that sit okay with you?
Well, at first I think it was, we just went along with the whole thing and got caught up in the whole publicity thing that we were receiving from, being one of Australia's most popular teeny bopper bands. But after a while, that got old, especially after Rick Springfield joined, and we wanted to become known more for our musical abilities as opposed to, being kind of pretty boys and appealing to the girls.
Tell us about the great ceremonial burning of the pink suit, which to this day I can still remember sitting and watching on Happening 70. Whose brainchild was that?
Oh, I think we all decided that we would do that on with Rusty Wiley. We just decided that we would change our image. Music was changing at that time too. Bands like Black Sabbath were becoming more popular, and the whole music scene, there was a trend towards, heavier rock and roll music. And we wanted to go with that trend and totally move away from the kind of music that we had been doing in the past. And that, of course, included, ditching the Think Pink, Think Zoot image.
Was there? How was the general reaction to the attempted image change? Did you come across cynical element amongst the music fraternity?
Oh, I think probably some of the more serious musicians in Australia at the time may have thought that it was a joke what we were trying to do, but we were very serious about wanting to change our that whole image and change the sound of our music as well. And of course, in doing so, we produced the the biggest single that the band ever had, and that was Lennon-McCartney's Eleanor Rigby.
Yeah. Those old...
You know, and we took... It wasn't just Eleanor Rigby. We took a lot of songs like that. We took... what's his name? We had a bunch of songs that we would take and totally rearrange on. We did other Beatles songs as well, you know. We did a version of Summer in the City by Loving Spoonful, and, you know, and just heavied the music up.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I don't think we lost any of our following in doing so. As a matter of fact, the band broke up amicably because our manager at the time, you know, we were hoping that we could have had Eleanor Rigby released over in the States, as we were wanting to do something in moving away and continuing our career in either England or the United States, but it didn't happen. And you know, Rick was getting restless too. He wanted to push his career on as well. And one day we just all sat around and said, look, let's just call it quits while we're at this height. And everybody went off and did their own thing.
Just the same, those old Zoot records, they stand up pretty well today as great examples of 60s pop. So regardless of all the other wonderful achievements you've done since, you must still look back on those days with a sense of pride.
Oh, I do. And, you know, it's been fun with me going back to Australia in the last 4 years to get reconnected with Daryl Cotton. And you know, we've been talking about even putting up a Zoot fan site and, you know, things like that. There's still quite a bit of interest there in what we did in that first band of ours.
Yeah, the two of you actually stayed together for a while after Zoot in a duo situation called Freeze, but it was more the brainchild of some advertising people than something you actually wanted to do yourself.
Yes. Now, originally we had some people come to us, the same advertising people, who wanted us to put together another fabricated band, and it wasn't called... I think they wanted to call it Deep Freeze. You know, so still incorporating the name of the suit manufacturer. But they wanted every member in the band to be named after a cloth material, so Daryl Cotton was fine, you know. But they presented the idea to us that one of us could be called Terry Lynn, and he had a brother called... No, Terry Lean. Oh, isn't it Terry Lean? I think it is. And then Crimplean was going to be his brother. And, you know, of course, Daryl and I were listening to these guys making these suggestions, and we said, listen, we've just come out of a band that went through all of that, and, you know, we didn't think it would catch on. And so we talked them into doing the duo idea. And, of course, that was Daryl and I just playing acoustic guitars to backing tapes that we recorded, and we appeared promoting Freeze suits in a lot of the department stores around Australia.
After that ended, did you have a pretty good idea what you wanted to do with the next phase of your career?
I did, in the way that I didn't enjoy the duo as much as I thought I was going to, and I really missed the interaction with other musicians that I had in Zoot. In other words, I missed being a true band member, and that's what drew me back to, you know, wanting to continue to play. I actually stopped playing bass in Zoot, and of course in Freeze I started playing 6-string guitar, and along with that I discovered that, you know, I could write songs, and so that was really the first time that I had ever attempted to write my own songs. So in that way it was good, and of course then I started playing electric 6-string guitar as well when I got the phone call from Graham Goebel to join the band Mississippi.
How aware were you of what Mississippi were doing before you got that call?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Were you aware of what Mississippi were about before you got the call from Graham? Were you a fan?
Well, Not really, because they had come over from Adelaide. They were in a group called Alison Gross. Alison Gross were actually the band that recorded that Drummond single, the
Chipmunks
version of Daddy Cool, yeah. And so, those guys had a relationship with Ron Tudor from the Fable label, and the three of them had come across from Adelaide and recorded an album of songs, of their original songs, but they didn't have a name yet. And I think it was Ron who actually suggested the name Mississippi to them, which they took on then, and of course released that very first Mississippi album that had Kings of the World on it, which was a top 10 hit in Australia. And but because there was only the three of them, they needed to put together a full band to take it out on the road and promote the album. And that's when I got the phone call from Graham, because all those guys still thought that I was playing bass, which I wasn't, And I actually went out and bought a bass, because after I heard the album, I was blown away. I thought it was so good that I wanted to be a part of the band, and went out and bought a bass guitar. But I felt that I wasn't really... I wasn't really growing as a bass player. I wasn't improving on that instrument. Whereas on the electric and acoustic six-string, I was forging ahead in leaps and bounds. And so I wanted to stay with the six-string guitar, which I did in the end, because I didn't work out as a bass player for Mississippi. But I think Graham really... liked my voice in the mix with their voices, and he went to bat for me for staying in the band and just becoming one of the other guitar players and songwriters.
Yeah, some of the guys weren't too keen to have you in, were they?
No, they weren't keen to. I got that impression for sure. I think they were under the impression that, why do we need another guitar player when we already have two, But then that actually turned out to be quite a unique thing for us, because ever since then, even in Little River Band, we've always been a three-guitar lineup.
Do you remember the feeling when you first heard your voice harmonising with Graham's?
I'm trying to think what song that would have been. I think it was probably in rehearsals with him. It wasn't so much as harmonizing with Graham. It was more, of course, this was also with the person who was the lead singer in Mississippi, a guy called John Mower. And the three of our voices really did blend very well together. But not quite as magical, I didn't think, as when Glenn Shorrock stepped into the mix. Yeah.
Can you put a finger on why perhaps Mississippi didn't enjoy the ongoing success it most certainly should have?
Well, we got off to a great start with Kings of the World, but then the following singles, Early Morning and Will I, didn't do quite as well at radio in Australia for some reason. And I really I couldn't say why Mississippi wasn't more popular than we felt it could have been. I don't know whether it was a management thing or not. But to me, the important thing about being in Mississippi was that, and I've said this in many interviews, I thought those 3 years were really the making, that they were my true apprenticeship years in the midst of that band.
I believe it was your idea to seek out Glenn Shorrock to join the fold?
Well, only because, when Mississippi went to England and we were over there, Derek Pellicci, Graham and I were sitting around and kind of analysing why Mississippi was not more popular than what it could have been. And we figured it came down to the fact that we didn't have a lead singer or someone who could relate to the audience. Because none of us were really people who, felt that comfortable with speaking to an audience. And of course, the best guy that I could think of was Glenn Shorrock. Glenn's always been such a great front man for all of the bands that he's been in, and he happened to be in London at the time. So when we called him, he said, well, he'd been over there for 5 years after the breakup of Axiom. And he said that he was heading back to Australia because he felt he really wasn't getting anywhere in England. and that was the reason for us also returning to Australia to reform the band.
Now, you actually did continue as Mississippi for a little while with the eventual Little River Band lineup, didn't you?
Yes, we did that because at least we knew that we were known somewhat, under that name. But it was only for a very, very short time before we changed our name.
Was the name change something you considered vital to finally achieving the success?
It was actually more our fans that brought that on than anything else. We had some fans who had very strong feelings about us being an Australian band with an American name. And so we decided to look for something that was a little bit more, generic as far as, there was bound to be a Little River anywhere in the world, or everywhere in the world, if you know what I mean. It was more a universal kind of name.
Yeah. Was there a game plan right from the start for Little River Band for overseas success? It was after the first two albums that the American market started to open up. Was that how you wanted it to be, sort of right from the start, to establish yourself back home first?
Well, I think the only reason it happened as quick as it did was that, Glenn Wheatley was managing us, and he had just come back from England as well. But he had set up some contacts for himself in Los Angeles when he worked for David Joseph over there. And so, it was almost a year to the day later when our first album was released that Glenn took the album under his arm and went over to LA and started meeting with all the various people to try and get us a deal over there. And that happened fairly quickly too. Of course, we signed with Capitol Records. There was
such an array of songwriting talent in the band. Was there a process you went through in choosing whose songs to record?
Yes, it was always a fairly democratic situation as far as song selection. Of course, when we first came together, we had so many songs to choose from, and their first album, because of the length of It's a Long Way There, we could only fit 9 songs on the album. And, the following albums, After Hours and Diamantina Cocktail, a lot of the songs on those albums were leftovers from that very first song selection that we went through, as well as, of course, we kept writing new songs as well. So it was always an ongoing... there was always, we were never short for songs to select for any of our albums.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead. Is there an album for you where the band really kicked in and peaked and became the band that you really wanted it to be?
Yeah. For me, that album was Sleeper Catcher. A lot of the other guys will tell you First Under the Wire was the pinnacle of the band's career, but for me, vocally and song selection-wise, to me, Sleeper Catcher was the ultimate album that I thought Little River Band made.
Now, you recently had the honour of being inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
What does that kind of recognition mean for you?
Well, I guess it's an honour to be my age and to be part of the Australian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, to be recognised for the music that we made during the 70s and early 80s, and to be recognised for what we did worldwide for Australian music. Now I'm hoping that at some point, Little River Band will be inducted into the American Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well.
Yeah, sure.
Which would be a great achievement for an Australian band. Seeing as Glenn is 60 now, and I'm heading towards that myself. Graham is too. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with all of that. But no, it's definitely a great honour to be in the Australian Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
You wouldn't be too far away from eligibility for the American one, would you?
I believe we're already eligible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think it might be a worldwide standard that you become eligible 25 years after the band first formed.
Okay.
So
well
River Band, is coming up to its 30th anniversary next year.
Well, and truly eligible.
Yes.
What's your take now on the whole naming rights saga that's been going on in recent years?
Well, I think it's just boiled down to the fact that, we can't do anything about it. Little River Band product obviously will continue to be released and repackaged, and, there are DVDs coming out now about the band, and I think Glenn, Graham and I are just trying to forge out a new thing, being the principal songwriters and singers in the band. We're trying to create a new thing now, and we're doing that mainly because, there are still so many fans out there who want to hear the original voices of Little River Band singing not only our old songs, but they're clamoring to hear what some of the newer stuff that we're still writing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
More so, it must be even more frustrating for you living over there and seeing firsthand this other band going around.
Yeah, well, I don't take too much notice of that, really, because it's not often that they that I see their name pop up in my area. And to be honest, I think, they're doing it on a level that I wouldn't want to do it on, personally. Which is one of the reasons why I left Little River Band when I did, because, the band was peaking and they were starting to accept tours that I personally thought weren't up to the stature of what the band was.
Right, so you're talking about getting to that dreaded nostalgia circuit type thing, is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, at the time, of course, at the time in '83, that was something that I definitely didn't want to do. Nowadays, of course, because of the age I'm at, to play Las Vegas and Lake Tahoe and places like that is quite acceptable for a band like Little River Band, So I've totally changed my views on that now. But at the time, I probably thought it was way too early for us to be playing shows like that.
So what are the upcoming plans, Beeb? Any plans of doing some more work with Glenn and Graham?
Yes, we're talking to Universal about recording a new CD sometime early next year to be released later in the year. And we're actually going through song selection for that right now.
Fantastic.
So that's coming up. We're making plans to come over to the United States. We have appointed a manager in Los Angeles, a guy called Bill Siddons, who is working to get Full Circle, our CD and DVD released through our old record label, Capitol Records, over here as well. So there are quite a few things in the pipeline. But I guess 2004 has been kind of a quiet year for us because a lot of the things are still in the planning stages.
Sure. After all,
maybe, hopefully next year things will pick up again.
And after all that comes to fruition, a fair chance we'll see you back on stage back home?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Once we record that new CD, there are, plans for recording that for a DVD, and we'll come back and play shows around Australia again, definitely.
Wonderful. And just one more thing before we wind up, Beeb, if you could go back and change anything, what would it be?
If I could go back and change anything?
Anything along the way.
That's a hard question. I think here's what I would change. If I could change anything by going back into the past, I would probably go back to the year that I left Little River Band and take Glenn Shorrock's advice when he suggested that we should all take a year off, go do our own thing, and then come back and look at the band's career again. I think had that happened, Little River Band in its most original form would have continued on.
Beeb, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate your catching up with us at such an early hour for you over there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's good.
Thanks for all the wonderful music over the years, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you back home for some shows in 2005.
Okay, I hope to meet you at one of those shows, John.
I'll be there, mate. No worries at all.
Okay,
Cheers, Beeb. Thanks a lot.
bye.
Bye-bye.